Hello and welcome back, friends, to another episode of Lynch Paints, where I, Lynch, will be painting, as voted for by my community poll that I did a few weeks back, the Novamarines. So let's grab our paintbrushes and our bolt guns, and let's dive straight into it. However, before we dive in, we're going to need a selection of paints, and these are all the ones I've used in the video today, alongside which we're going to need a medium-sized brush. We're going to need a bit of a fluffy dry brush, a smaller detail-y-ish brush, a little knackered tiny brush for metallic paints, and of course our teeny tiny brush for all of those teeny tiny places. So we'll start out with a very heavy zenithal highlight. So what you do is that you will spray it black, and then over the top you then spray it white. And because about half, I'll say about half, exactly half of this miniature is going to be in white, I thought I'd just make it a little bit heavier, just so then our lovely apostrophe white contrast paint has got a little bit more showing on this. So we're going to grab it here, medium brush, and just dip it into some water just to get it a little bit wet. And I believe that the right hand side on the top is blue, and then the left bottom is also blue. So we're going to go and take the bottom right and then the top left. We're going to put on a nice generous coat of this apostrophe white. So while we're waiting for the apostrophe white to dry, what we can do is that we can make a bit of a headway on the blue areas, or at least the majority of. And I'm going to use this Cantor blue and Lothran blue as a bit of a mixture. So I do have a blue contrast paint, but it's the Leviathan blue, and it is a very, very dark blue. And I thought that it would be almost a little bit too dark to use for this miniature. So we're going to do a 50-50 mix. I'm going to thin it down as well with just a little bit of water. Just going to carefully just fit this guy up, and then we're just going to start to apply just a nice layer just going over the opposite ends of this miniature. So after the first layer, it is going to look a little bit something like this. It will look quite patchy and a little bit streaky and that sort of thing, which is perfectly fine because we're taking a sort of darker colour and we're putting it over a lighter sort of base colour. But the primary thing is just getting the colour down first, and then through wet blending and putting on a few extra thin layers, we can eventually help to smooth it out. Now, you can be as careful as you can in the world, but sometimes, unfortunately, you will end up with something like that little kind of kink there on the backpack. I did end up with a little bit of blue as well, just on the wrong side of the helmet as well, which was a bit of a pain in the butt. However, there is a way to remedy this. So I have this Corax white base colour, and that bit is most important because the base range is a lot thicker. It's not as diluted as the normal layer paints are, so it will go over sort of like darker colours against your white. So what we can do is simply really carefully go over the top of that bit there, and just we can use this just to tidy up any areas that we have just overstepped a little bit. And there will be a bit of this as we build up our whites and also our blue as well. There will be a little bit of that. Now, if you were to apply the Corax white just straight over so white paint without using the apostrophe white contrast paint, it will look grey because it's not a brilliant white. It's a bit of an off-white, the Corax white. So just keep that in mind as well when you're doing this. You can see that the back here is predominantly quite dark, and the contrast paint didn't really do much to remedy that. So what we can do is that we can grab wherever I have placed it. We can always grab just a little bit of black. And what we can do is, or if you've got a grey, that's even easier, but if you just grab a little bit of black, and what we're going to do is that we're just going to just help just to blend this up to a sort of lighter colour. So we're going to make a bit of a mid-tone sort of grey, and I'm just going to go in and just fill this area out. Let's bring it down to there. And then we can just start to build our layers up just a little bit, so it's going to match roughly the rest of the model. Now, of course, because it is in a darker area, we don't want it like as bright as, you know, the top of the model, like we did with the Zenithal. But we want it to at least be not quite as contrasting. So we can add a little bit in, just here and there. If it does look, again, a little bit too bright, then we can always just add in a bit more black, just to darken it down, just to deepen that colour, just so we get a nice, smooth transition. As you can see, just by adding in just that little bit of black there, making a really dark grey, that's helped just to blend that in there. And then we can do the same with just in here as well, just around the back. Now, of course, keep your paints nice and thin, so that means that way you're going to get a nice smooth transition in between your coats. So once we're done just messing around with tidying up our little kind of blue areas that we may have just gone over a little bit, it's time to add in our second thin coat over the blue. So what I generally tend to do on smooth areas like this part here and as well the shoulder pad is, if you've gone up and down on the first coat, then just go left and right on the second, and that way you're not sort of retreading the same lines, and you should get a much smoother finish once it's dry. So our marine is really starting to take shape, so it's a lot smoother now on the blue areas. And then so what we're going to do is that we're just going to carry on just building up our colourways of the blue. So I'm just going to grab a nice big old blob of that Lothran blue, a little bit more of this Cantor blue. I suppose if you have ultramarine blue, that would work very, very well, but I don't have that, so I'm going to mix up my own because I can. And also because the nearest hobby store is all the way in town, and I just can't be bothered to go because I've got pretty much, I can just make my own. So what's the point? And I don't think I have enough room on my paint rack as well for much more paint. So we're just going to keep our paints nice and thinned. And again, just like with pretty much all my previous videos, painting wise that is, we're going to thin our paints to almost like a glaze, and we're just going to build our colours up, gradually working up lighter and lighter, just focusing on where the light is, so it's going to be catching the armour. So I'm going to worry about too much about underneath, on the inside of the leg, or around the back underneath, so the backpack area. We'll give it a little highlight as well, of course, but we're going to concentrate on the open area of the leg, obviously like the helmet, the backpack, and the shoulder pad, and that sort of thing. So we're just going to just pick up a few areas, and as we build up our colours to a lighter blue, we will then gradually work in smaller and smaller areas until we are almost at a highlighting colour, and then that's when we'll go over the miniature and highlight it really nicely. And you can build up your colours to as bright of a blue as you like. It's entirely up to you. I have seen some images online that of the Novamarines. Some are like a nice deep blue, darkish blue like this. Some are much more lighter blue. So it just depends on your personal preference at the end of the day of how light you'd like to take your blue. Okay, so now after probably 4 coats, give or take, of just doing a little bit of wet blending just here and there, the blue is looking really, really nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to highlight. So I'm going to use this Lothran blue. So I'm just going to dip in just a little bit of the Cantor blue, just so it's not too bright. I'm not a huge fan of really bright highlights, but if you are and you're that way inclined, then happy days, just use just the pure Lothran blue. And then you want to grab yourself a nice thin brush, one with preferably a really nice fine point on the end. Then I have to use something as chunky as this, and then just start to highlight the blue areas. And again, I'm not a fan of highlighting every single edge, but if you are, then go ahead, you know, happy days, have fun, you know. But I like to just highlight just a few areas here and there, just to give the impression that it is indeed highlighted. So we're going to move over onto the white half. So I've got some of this lovely white scar. Turn it around a little bit so you can see a little bit better. There we go. And with this, we got ourselves a nice medium-sized brush. I'm just going to dip it into some water. I'm going to take a blob and I'm just going to put it there. I was about to put it into the blue. That would not be very good. And we're going to use this as a bit of a glaze. So I'm going to go over some of the areas just to kind of brighten parts of the model, just back up just a tad, just like that. So we thin it down, which means that when it dries it's not going to be as brilliant as this, and also means it's going to smooth out the zenithal. So I did do it with a rattle can. It is advised to do it with an airbrush if you have one, just because you get a much smoother result, because with the rattle can, with the spray cans, it does look a little bit so speckly, or rather that it can look speckly. So if you have an airbrush, definitely utilize that, because you're going to get a much smoother transition with that. But this is going to help just to smooth out those areas just a little bit more as well. And then what we can do is, from there, we can go straight into highlighting the white areas. So now we move on to the highlighting. So pretty much just as we did with the blue, just find a nice brush that's got a nice tip to it, and then we're just going to just highlight as much or as little as we like. It's entirely up to you how you like to highlight, and just take it nice and easy, and we will move on to the next step once we're done with this. So now that we've got that nice boring bit done and out of the way with highlighting is done, so we're going to move on to just a nice little cheat of using this Black Legion contrast paint, or the equivalent of course. And what we're going to do, just using pretty much the same brush really, I've just kind of been using throughout the majority of this model really. We're going to go over all the kind of the dark areas. So you've got the weapons, you've got the vents on the backpack. And of course we just want to go as carefully as we can, so find a brush with a nice neat point to the end. So I'm going to go very carefully, and it doesn't matter overly much if when you put it on it's a little bit streaky, because of course the majority of this we're going to paint, or rather dry brush over the top in a silver, so it doesn't matter overly much if it is a little bit messy, because we will fix that later on. But the point is just to get it down onto these areas, and then we can work out sort of fixing it from there. So the Black Legion contrast paint has dried. I'm just going to mix up just a little bit of a dark grey. So I have this Admin Stratton grey, and I'm just going to mix it with a little bit of our Abaddon black. And that's a little bit too much, so I'm just going to use it just to sort of dry brush highlight the bolt rifle. I know that the contrast paint does leave the raised areas a little lighter, but I just like to just give it just a little little bit of a highlight just over the top. Nice and easy. Then of course, you can go back over with a thinner brush like this, drop in just a little bit more of your lighter grey, and then we're just going to pick out just a few areas just to highlight. Now we're going to move on to the metal areas. So we've got this Iron Warriors, and I've got my nice dry brush, and we're just going to go over all of the metallic areas. Moving on now to the gold areas, I have this brass scorpion, and it's a nice sort of darker gold. And I have this kind of rather knackered brush, so I'm just going to go over and use this just to do some of the gold, including of course the giant Aquila on the front chest plate here. And then what we can do is afterwards is that we can put on a sort of brown wash over the top and then highlight using a lighter gold or indeed silver. Sorry about that, my mic cut out just at that last point. So you can put a brown wash over the top, or you can use a null oil, which is a black wash. The brown tends to work a little bit better just because it's a nice, it's a warmer colour, and that pairs really nicely with the gold. But it's entirely up to you which you would prefer and which, of course, you have on hand. But we're just going to highlight just the gold areas with this Retribution armour, just to make it just pop a little bit more. And then speaking of popping, we can use this Rune Fang steel just to highlight some of the areas of our metallic, sort of metalwork bits and pieces. So I'm thinking primarily the kind of the sharp side of the blade, nice little bit there, and again just on the other side, like that. And you can kind of use as much or as little as this as you like. Same with sort of highlighting the armor panels. You can highlight the entire thing with this Rune Fang steel, or you can just kind of pick out a few areas and leave it as that. Is entirely up to you. I'm going to move over onto his eye lenses. So we have a nice red, so we got a mixture of Mephiston red and Abaddon black, a bit nice dark red. And then we're just going to fill in the first kind of 2/3 of the eye lens with this colour. Wash it out, and then we're going to use pure Mephiston red for the first half/3 of the eye lens. Just get a little bit more on my brush. And then to make it stand out, we're not going to use white, because of course that's going to make it look pink, and we don't really want that. So we've got this nice Troll Slayer orange, and mix that in, and that will help to brighten up our red just enough to make it look like it's glowing on the inside. We just want to just pop in just a little bit at the front, don't want loads, just a tiny bit. Like that. And then, rinsing this off, it's going to grab our white, and then we want to just add in just a teeny tiny white dot at the back of the lens. Just going to wipe up the majority there, just so it's not all lingering at the base of my brush. A little white dot there, and then one there, just like that. Okay, so now we're going to go and do the fun part, which is going to be the logo. So I got with me a white, a grey and a black. Apologies for the little camera wobble there. Just loaded up the image. Got a nice fine brush, I have dipped it into some water just so then we get a nice flow as well. And we want that really nice point, especially with all the little kind of points on the star for the logo. And yeah, I'm just going to just dive right on in. Check that we've got. Yep. Okay. And so here we are at the end of the video, so thank you ever so much for tuning in all the way through to the end. It's been a really interesting one, painting this kind of quadrant style of colour scheme. I haven't really done it much before, and I don't know, it's interesting to kind of think, do I want to do this again? I mean, probably. It all depends on what you guys vote for. So I will be putting up a poll soon of like the next chapter for you guys to vote for that you want to see on the channel. But I will be doing some more of the Halo style of videos. I've been sent a bunch of stuff from my friends over at Kraken Studios. And yeah, it's going to be some really fun stuff. I won't disclose what they are at this point in time, but you're just going to have to tune in for the next one to find out. So, of course, if you aren't subscribed already, then go ahead and click that subscribe button down below. If you enjoyed this video, then, of course, show your appreciation with a like and comment down below. Do you collect Novamarines? Have I done them justice? And would you want to collect them and paint them yourselves? And what do you think of the video guide? I mean, you know, any kind of constructive criticism is always welcome. Just so I know what to improve on and the like. And of course, if you want to pick up some Marines for yourselves, then check out my affiliate link for Wayland Gamers down in the description below. And there'll be some stills and reels of this miniature over at my Instagram page at Lynch Paints, and all the links will be in the video description down below. And again, massive thank you to reaching to the end. I want to try and get as close as I can to 3,000 subs by the end of the year, so do your best, help out, click the subscribe button down below, and of course share this video with your friends and get Lynch Paints videos out there. Just gonna give me a hand with that. That'd be hugely appreciated. I will also be launching soon a Discord, because it seems like everyone is making a Discord channel at the minute. I just kind of want to finalise some little bits and pieces, but when it goes up I will let you all know. So, some exciting things to look forward to. And without further ado, stay safe, stay beautiful, and we'll see you all next time.